take a roll call.
Commissioner Watt,
Present.
Commissioner Georgioff,
Here.
Commissioner Simpson,
Here.
Commissioner Rabb.
Here.
Okay. At this time, we will take any citizen communication for items not on the agenda. Seeing none, and with no one online, we don't have to ask for comments from anyone online. So, next item up is agenda approval.
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's unanimous. Okay, first item, we have a public hearing, and this is Ordinance 1579 to amend Ordinance 1431 for collection and calculation of school impact fees as authorized by the RCWs. And before we get started, I want to explain this letter and the cause of this letter.
Do we need to excuse Brian?
Excuse me?
Do we need to excuse Brian
I don't,
Mattson?
we haven't usually done that. so-
We've never, yeah, we haven't usually done
I
that.
just
It's-
wasn't sure. So.
Yeah. I have a strong feeling that when an applicant is asking us to do something, that they be here to answer questions about what they're asking the city to do, what they're asking us to do. You know, and typically this is a land use item or something, and so it's not really a impact fee thing very often. And you know, it's our planner's job to give us background and findings, you know, items out of the comp plan that support a request or maybe of a conflict to a request. And so that's where it's important to have the applicant here. And so I kind of told Travis during the week that they better be there, you know, or we could continue their meeting. In response to that, because Travis reached out to them, and they have school board meeting tonight as well at 6:30. So they have school board, every time we have planning commission, they have school board, I guess. So,
First and third.
this letter was written, and I wouldn't continue a public hearing on my own. I would give you guys, you know, offer you guys the ability to say, hey, we should continue this because we can't ask the applicant any questions. So that's why this letter was written, and it does outline a few things. It, you know, I think she did a nice job of explaining some stuff on here, but it's up to you. If you guys want to go forward with the public hearing, or if you have questions for the school district that they need to be able to answer.
So it doesn't sound like we'll be able to have our,
I think with a little more planning, something would happen, even if it meant us adjusting our meeting a day or something. But are you gentlemen here to speak on this? You're here to speak?
Here to listen.
You're here to listen? So, Dave, are you planning on speaking on the school? So,
is there a deadline on when this needs to be decided on?
This is in relationship to the new comprehensive plan that hasn't even been adopted yet. So that is one of the findings that we will have, is the fact that the comprehensive plan that they're referring to here hasn't been adopted yet, amongst other things. So we can hold a public hearing. We won't have any comments from the applicant. Travis can give us all the background he knows about. I know, Whitney, you weren't here last meeting, neither was I, and so it's going to be a rinse and repeat for a couple of you, but would you guys like to continue with the...
I don't see any reason of continuing with the conflict. I mean, either one public meeting would have to be changed or another to have somebody here for either way, which is a whole scenario in itself. I think that if we have questions that can't be answered, then it can continue over, unless there's a time constraint, until we're ready to pass it.
My understanding is there's not a time, it's not like there's a deadline like this has to go to a ballot or anything, so there's no okay. So
I'd like to hear what, she had a conversation with Travis
Yeah.
since the last meeting. I'd like to hear what happened there.
okay, so we'll hold our, we don't have to change the agenda at all, we don't have to make a motion, we just start with the staff report.
Okay, thank you. My name is Travis Goddard. I'm the Community Development Director for the City of Woodland. And for the record, the presentation that I have for you tonight will be placed on the project page for this within the next couple days. So I wanted to start by, David asked me to start with adding some Woodland Municipal Code and to go through the individual sections of the stuff that you're covering. So I'm going to step back to 3.40.100, which is the portion of the or the portion of the Woodland Municipal Code that talks about the capital facilities plan. And one of the things that's in the ordinance is this section here shows that the code reads the 2019 through the 2025 capital facilities plan for the school district, and the document that is attached to the ordinance is the 2026 to 2031. And so part of the reason why there is such a big jump in fees is because of the construction increases since that plan was adopted in 2019. So essentially this is a 6-year increase in construction costs that are driving these calculations. So the section that the school superintendent pointed out, and that is our code specifically has a calculation formula in section 060, and this is what it looks like, and each of those acronyms is described, and that is essentially the school impact fee is divided by the capital facilities factor plus the school student factor plus the all of those average values for the students and yada yada yada. So not going into that exact calculations, I'm breaking it down to kind of how my planner brain works, because I'm not an engineer or an accountant. But essentially, if you look at this slide, it shows the school impact fee is based upon the cost of the elementary school in today's estimate, and they used the Ridgefield Elementary School that was just built to kind of figure out the $600 per square foot, which is what they came up with, and then $2.5 million to buy a piece of property, and that's how they get the $31.3 million. Now the school capacity is 400 students, so dividing that number by 400 students gives you an average cost per student of about $78,000 for the capital investment in that elementary school. And when Max was here last meeting, he brought up the question, and that is, well, all of our growth isn't paying for that entire school, is it? And he wanted to make sure that it was proportionate to how much the city is paying for. And the next part of that question was answered in this slide right here, and that is the average cost is per student $78,250, and what the school district does is they knock 15% of that number right off the top. It's kind of recognized that the existing school district and the schools that are here contribute additional students because their houses are already here. And then they also recognize that there is a 65% match for state funds. So our district only has to come up with a portion of that money. And then they know from the statistical analysis and statewide averages that the average single family household produces essentially a quarter of an elementary student on average at any given time. Whereas multifamily produces a little more. They're more likely to have 1 in 3 homes has multifamily units will have an elementary school student in it. So when you run that number, 78,000 by 85%, by 65%, by a quarter of a student or a third of a student, that number comes out to about 10,700 and about 14,300. Now, of course, the ultimate numbers, they're a little more exact in their calculations, and I couldn't quite reproduce them because I think that's because they have some money squirreled away from impact fees. So I don't think they were running the full calculation on 3.3 million because they do have school impact fees in the bank. So their number ends up slightly less than the number I calculated, and this is the exhibit that's attached to the hearing agenda, and it is essentially 10,500 instead of the 10,700, and it's 13,600 for multifamily, whereas I had it a little higher. So it gives you an idea, an understanding that the expectation really by the time you're done with it, it's only a fraction of that 31 million that's paid by the individual homes that are built. And the more we build, the more students we generate. And so if we fill half the school, we will have contributed half of the impact fees that it takes to build that school with state match, with the rest of the school district paying 15%.
So in those numbers there, where is the Clark County collects impact fees, correct?
So this calculation is per student, so whether that student is in Clark County, whether it's in the city, or whether it's in Cowlitz County, that's the cost per student.
So
And what the school superintendent also pointed out in this letter, and that is when they start collecting this money and whether or not the city chooses to assess that full cost. There are other sections in the Growth Management Act which talks about affordability. So we could say we're not going to change our impact fee. We could say we're not going to collect impact fee. They say we can collect $2,000 if we want to because there are other reasons for us to set that. This is simply a calculation of their costs, whether Clark and the city assess impact fees is entirely up to our elected officials.
So at any time, if you need to say that's something the school people should answer, feel free. But Whitney might remember a little better. She might have her handle on the pulse a little more. But it seemed to me that when we started collecting the impact fees, we kind of started that program so that we could show it's beneficial and show that to Cowlitz County that it's beneficial. And I was going to ask the school district how many times they have gone to Cowlitz County and asked to impose impact fees. And did you, by chance, get any information on what they have done?
They have not approached them.
Okay, so
I believe
To the best-
the city has approached them multiple times, but I don't know that the school district has directly.
And I should qualify by that saying, to my knowledge.
yeah, right. So, and that's an answer I would like to have. How much, when they give the, because they're going to ask Clark County for an increase too. When they ask Clark County for an increase, are they going to use these same numbers, or is Clark County going to look at them and go, oh, well, Woodland's pulling the rope for 400 students, and you want to build a school for 400 students? And furthermore, Cowlitz County is going to look at it and go, boy, that's a lot of money per permit for a school that you're already funding through Woodland. So, those are all, I'm a proponent of schools. I got 2 grandkids in Woodland schools, and I don't want them to be crowded, and I don't want them to be in portables, but my feeling is this burden should be shared equally, because the school's not going to say city limits kids only in the school. So anyway, those are questions I would have had that we're not going to get answered today, and I hope I didn't interrupt you too soon, or is it a good time to start talking?
That's the end of my presentation.
Whitney, I'm eager to hear what.
So, the impact fees originally started with the fire department to help the fire department funding. We found out in around, I think, 94 that because we were partly in Clark County that we could do this. And so it was originally to help with fire department funding. And then the school, through that whole process, found out, oh, well, we can do impact fees for all these different things. And realistically, it's only because of us having our toe in Clark County. Cowlitz County doesn't have to do the growth management projections like we do. I don't know if they're getting close to having to do that, but Cowlitz County commissioners have always refused to do any of the impact fees because they would have to I believe they would have to fully go under the Growth Management Act and to do the same planning that Woodland City is doing, but do it for the whole county to be able to assess them. I think there's some workarounds that they could do for some of them to not have to do the whole thing, but I don't remember exactly. But I do think that it's not overly fair that the city, when you're building within the city, you're paying what's the average? Close to $20,000 in impact fees per house, where if you live outside in the county, you can buy $20,000 in upgrades to your house or whatever. So definitely the residents are footing the bill for that, not just for the school, but for roads, for fire, for all of it. But we also, what do you do? Because it's not the existing residents who are the ones that are creating more students, unless, as if somebody's selling their house, that's not, you're just trading out. And so it's a catch-22. I mean, eventually everybody's going to pay for it anyway, because 65% is coming from the state. So it gets caught up in there. But the hardest part that I have for this is probably the ADU part of it, because to me, I was thinking in my mind, if you're doing a 1-bedroom ADU, the chances of having a student and having student costs for that is less than if you're building a 3 or a 4-bedroom ADU, which you could if you have a primary house that's 3,000 square feet. You can build 2 1,500 square foot house ADUs, and you could make those, multi-bedroom, and that those are going to have children. And so having a 1-bedroom ADU that might just be like a true mother-in-law suite where you're not producing students, and that being the same cost as a 1,500 square foot ADU, 2,000 square foot ADU, and the fee is the same, that is a little bit harder for me to swallow, because most people who are building it for a family member to live on the property are trying to look at ways to be able to live in the state of Washington the way that it is.
I think, don't we have a square foot maximum on an ADU?
It's 40%.
We currently do, yes.
And is it a percentage or a square footage?
So it's both. So we have both of those, and that's the next section we'll get
Yeah,
to.
this next section we'll
Yep.
get to.
So
So
it's-
this is why all of this has to kind of,
But I think the
Yeah.
state is changing it, so it's just a percentage.
So it's currently 3 to 800, and then the new state limit is you can't make it less than maximum. You can't make the maximum 1,000 or less. So in other words, a big one can be bigger than 1,000.
you can only
theoretically.
limit it to
Yep.
1,000.
Yep.
So, okay.
That's the lowest limit. You could limit it at 1,500 or 2,000, but you can't limit it any lower.
Are we ready to move to Sharon? Get her thoughts? Or you got more thoughts there?
Part of my questions were answered. And I guess one of my questions was which area in Woodland are part of the urban growth areas? And does the urban growth area fall under that?
So under the Growth Management Act, the growth area includes the city and its urban growth area.
Okay.
So
Which there's only a handful of acres that are in the urban growth area that aren't in the city.
Yeah.
It's a very small little piece.
Yeah. And is there anything that if we end up having to annex in, that, I guess it's not new building, so, I mean, I was just wondering if there's any way as we annex in, those people get to pay part of their share of the schools and impact fees as well, but there wouldn't be new buildings, so it wouldn't really fall under that. But it has created a rift, I think realistically, within the city and the county, Cowles County, that is, for the last 30 years, that the city residents do. I mean, you're losing 20,000 nowadays. You're losing $20,000 just to be inside the city limits for the impact fees. So, but I also I think when you're looking at apartments, you're also looking at, I don't know why they wouldn't use the maximum number for the apartments, because the apartments are gonna be more likely to have children. I would, especially if they're not a single bedroom apartment. If you're looking at 2, 3 bedroom apartments, you're looking at people who are starting families that are gonna have more of an impact because they're likely to be the people having kids. So why would you not maximize that? But that's my thoughts.
Sharon, thoughts?
Well, at the last meeting, Donna Butler, not here tonight,
She's at the school board meeting.
yeah. She heard it said at one of the school board meetings that, enrollment is actually dropping. So, how soon are they really going to need a new elementary? I don't know the answer to that.
We crunched all that data doing the comprehensive plan that is trying to say that the persons per household is dropping and stuff, but boy, it depends on what you search and how you search it. And I did an interesting search. I was out of town when I searched it, because you know how Google can be when you're in a certain area, right? So I was out of town and I searched 98674, and it came up with, Woodland and everything. And the the data that AI produced out of that, I guess it was AI, but had Cowlitz County in 98674, the persons per household was a lot higher than what we've seen. When you search, when you gotta do two things: get out of town and just search it by the zip code. I don't know where the zip code and the school district region overlap, but it was interesting for me to see that there's some different data sets out there. But we can say that we've had how many house permits this year? You know, we've got site plan approvals for a couple hundred units, right? So we know there's going to be a couple hundred units, and those people aren't going to be, you know, there's going to be some kids going into the school because of that. But I do believe, I know, I have family that works at the school, and enrollment is down right now. In fact, the school's website says that their enrollment is down. City of Woodland population is also down. You know, I thought it was interesting that she asked in her letter that we she asked that we not reduce it, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, I didn't mean to steal your thunder there.
No, which makes it sound like, you know, she's okay with the reduction, just not below.
We have somebody here who wants to talk about it.
All right. We ready to open it up for public comment?
Yeah.
And we can comment some more after that. We can talk about it all night. All right, at this time, we'll open the floor up to public comment. So, come on up.
Thanks for having me. My name is Max Bonder. I live at 203 Tagawa Court. Just quickly about my situation, my family. So we immigrated here when I was 9 years old. My family's immigrants from Soviet Union. And I guess we found this, grew up Southeast Portland, slowly made our way up. And so we found a home here at Raspberry Park with my family. So we got 2 kids, right now 4 and 2. And I do look forward to Woodland growing and, you know, schools being built. Right now, one of the challenges was we wanted to sign up our son for the preschool because he's 3, 4 years old. We're excited. We signed him up, but the class was canceled due to low enrollment as well. So one of the things that Travis and I have also been talking, and I guess I'm on several of the items on the agenda tonight. One of the things that I've been planning and working on, I moved out to Woodland here. So my parents are immigrants. They don't really have any sort of retirement plan except Social Security. As you know, that's not a bright future. So one of the things we did was, the lot that I bought, I plan to build an ADU on it. So essentially make kind of a father-in-law suite. Now the problem is too, if I built it and they move in, they don't really have money to pay for it. So fortunately, they started releasing some of these laws and updates where you can build up to 2 ADUs. So my hope is to actually build the 2 ADUs, let my parents move into one, possibly rent out the other to help offset the cost of trying to take care of my aging parents. So big scheme of things, that's kind of what I've been working through. In the middle of this process, I know they started doing the SDC, fee updates. I personally don't mind the idea of, new elementary school and things going in and improving. I have an education as an engineer, so I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Washington. And so when I was looking at the math and the data that was presented by the school board, I kind of summarized it, brought up some concerns to Travis as I was looking through the math. And so primarily it's not a discussion whether schools should go in, should not go in. It's mostly about the discussion of the math, proportionality, and how it gets applied. And so I just had a couple quick comments because in engineering school we were taught one thing, garbage in, garbage out, when it comes to variables in math. And so I just wanted to point out something that I'm seeing as far as the calculations that are being presented. Just so, I guess from my perspective, and I could be wrong, I'm not, like I said, Travis, I would trust Travis more than myself because he's on the planning side. I'm more of a math guy. So, but I did want to point out, if Travis, if you can back up on one of the slides, this slide right here.
Yep.
Oh, hi there. So, and if again I kind of see it.
You're fine, Max. You're fine. Did I get that right, Max?
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
Max, yeah. So, the thing that I'm questioning here is this number, the 400 capacity that's being presented, because all the math hangs on this, right? So you start out with this capacity number, and then you divide the school cost by this capacity number, you get the student, right? And Travis, and then you move on to the next slide, right? Where you do this calculation. It's all based off of that 78,000. So what I'm questioning is, if you go back to the slide, back to that 400 capacities, where does this number originate from? Why is this number required?
That's the school design capacity, what they would build a elementary school to house.
Correct. So that's the school design capacity, right? Now, system development charges are designed to cover actual capacity needs, not desired capacity needs, but actual capacity needs, right? So if you have a broken system, you need to increase system development charges to cover the system that is broken, not the system that is desired, right? Because we can look at that number and say, hey, it's a 400 student capacity. Why not make it 2,000 student capacity, right? And increase everybody's system development charges. Well, you're supposed to only increase capacity to the level of requirement, right? And so the methodology that I'm seeing that the school being applied is correct. So what they're starting to say is that the school, and this is from the report that the school provided when they did their math. Now they say we don't have, I think I just read the letter today. They say, well, we don't have any sort of control over how things are, calculated. Well, in their own report right now, they're saying that in Section 5, Table A, they're saying in 2024 they have a 903 student capacity, right? But they also have a demand table where they say in 2025 their actual demand is 900. So that means their 903 number is sufficient to cover the 900 number in 2025, right? So what does that mean? In 2025, there's adequate capacity to the system. So why would there be a system development charge increase in 2025 when there's sufficient capacity? Okay, and so now the way the math is laid out is they're saying, okay, well in 2026, they're going to need a capacity of 928 students. Now I haven't seen the math that they performed to calculate how the students are increased or what the data is behind the population increase or the student increases that they're using. They're saying that that's coming from the city, and I would defer that to Travis about how they're generating the student count. But what I'm seeing is in 2026, the elementary school is going to need 928 seats, but they have a 903 student capacity, right? So that means in 2026, they're going to need 25 extra seats, right? So if there's a failure in capacity by 25 seats, in 2026, you would look at your system development charges and you can increase them to cover the capacity losses for those 25 students, right? And slowly but surely, so every year, if you look at, 2027, they have 955, the capacity is 903, right? There's deficiency. So 2027, you increase it to cover the deficiency. 2028, you increase it to cover the deficiency, right? And you can keep going like that, and that's where they end in 2031, where they say that's the 5-year plan. In 2031, they say our facility needs are going to be, we're going to be short 161 seats. So they're going to need 161 extra seats than they have today. Understandable. We probably need to build some sort of new building, right? 161 kids. But then they take that 161 and they say, we're going to build a 400 student capacity school, and then they start running the math, right? And how do they get to that number, the $28 million elementary school, is they take $600 per student times $120 a square foot, or I'm sorry, 600 per square foot times 120 square feet per student. So that's how they came up with that number. So they took 400 times 600 times 120, and they come up with that 28 million. And what they should be doing is if everyone's following along, is they should be doing 161, which is the required capacity, 161 times 600 times 120 to come up with the elementary school cost to be covered by system development charges, right? So,
Just out of curiosity,
uh-huh.
system development charges are what? Is we pay in our property taxes to the school district and to the state that gives the money back to the school district, and there's impact fees. Just define the system development charges for me, if you would.
I think you meant impact fee.
That's exactly it. It's impact fees.
Okay.
And the terminology is derived from impact, is that there is actually an impact. So if you have 161 student impact, you apply the fees towards that impact. Now they're saying there's going to be a 400 student impact, but their own table is showing 161 student impact. So why are they using the 400 student capacity as the impact fee when in 2031 they're showing only 161 students, right? And I think just going back to the table where they're showing the deficiencies throughout the years, right? They're showing 2025, there is no impact. You know, there's adequate capacity. So they're showing that the capacity fails and there's an impact, starting 2026. And it's not instantaneous like this, it's incremental, right? So all this, from everything that I understand about impact laws and the way the system impact fees are formulated, it's always based on the actual impact that's being created. That's how you formulate. If you want something above and beyond that, that's where they actually go back in the table. If you look at the math, is they say for everything else, we will generate a bond, right? So they say we're gonna do a vote, everybody votes, 65% vote. For everything else we want on top of the actual impact, we will cover that by the bond plus the match from the state. So all this to say, I'm here just to question the mathematics, because I would like the impact to be actually impact fees based on the actual impact, incremental throughout the years, as they're showing, if the math is correct, if the demographic growth is correct, if the student actually, if there's an impact of students and it's actually growing, raise the system and development charges incrementally year by year as it grows. And then once the capacity reaches to the point where, okay, we need to build that building, you take all those accumulated impact fees that's been accumulated to date, you hold a bond vote meeting, and everybody, contributes, builds a school, state does the match, and, and we move forward. So I just wanted to point that out, and hope you take that into consideration.
All right. Thank you, Max.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems is it's hard to look at only a 6-year period of time, because realistically you're not going to fill a school unless you're Richfield currently in a 6-year period of time. And I think that's where Max is going at. And so like it almost appears that it's like upfronting those first students that are going to be in there, although the next houses that are built with the next ones, they're going to fill the rest of that school, but that's actually going to be funding the next schools. And so there's multiple ways of looking at it. But my question is more, what is the standard size for an elementary school for communities that are our size? Because I was frustrated at both the building of North Fork Elementary and the high school, because when you look at building a high school, back then it was easily $50 million, and back when that bond was trying to get pushed through. And my question was, are we building enough capacity that you're not going to come back to us in 10 years and say, oh, we've now outgrown our high school? And that's where we're getting at. Although we're currently, like, the shift since COVID and other things going on have caused people to pull their kids out of school or move out of Washington, kind of both of those things. But why are the elementary schools 400? Is that what an elementary school, is that the gold standard?
And what are the ones,
Or because why pay $2.5 million in property taxes when where those portables currently sit, could you not build an addition onto the elementary school and make that a 600 elementary school?
what is the capacity of the elementary schools now?
That's in here. So the capacity of Columbia is 399, Yale is 63, and North Fork is 441. However, that's K through 4. And realistically, it's been ridiculous for years that we've moved 5th grade over to the middle school. You're just shifting the problem to
Yeah.
another school. And so, like, if the gold standard is 400, then that, obviously, that's one of my questions, and that's not really an impact fee question, that's a question about the school. But if the gold standard is 500, why are we building 400 capacity schools? That's my question.
So, the comprehensive plan, as we moved it through, had projected growth of 670 housing units
About, yep.
for a 20-year period. So 670 units at a half a kid a unit.
It's 300 for
Yeah.
20 years. Yeah.
335 in 20 years isn't as many students as they're, asking for the math to build this school for. And furthermore, our property tax is equal county to city. If you live in the city, you pay the same amount of property taxes toward the schools as you do if you live in the county. And if you own a business, you don't create any students and you pay for the schools, which I looked up Columbia Carbonates the other day, and they're just between the levy and there's 2 sections for Woodland schools in the deal. And without the state, it was like $90,000 without the state portion of schools for one employer. It's a lot of money in that budget. And at any rate, and I also really feel like we need to everybody pulling on that rope equally together. City, county, and county. Anyway, we're open. We have the floor open for public comment. We're talking about the school's request. If you're good, Donna, I don't want to force you.
There's pros and cons.
This,
So y'all get to figure that out.
okay. So, anybody else?
I mean, because some of my questions isn't about the impact fees, but are school related. Because at Columbia Elementary School, they have a Head Start is there, which is not required to be on school property. I don't know if they lease the space. They also have daycare there, which is not school related on the school property. All these are in portables, and then they also have preschool there, which is not school. And so, like, they have the ability to expand into those portables, and yeah, it would suck for those businesses that are being run there, but those are not school businesses.
Yeah.
So, but those aren't impact related. But those are questions.
As same token, they're using, even though they're in the portables, they're using square footage.
Yeah.
And as Max was saying that he went to sign his child up for preschool and it was shut down because of lack of, there's been some preschool drama. I don't know it all. I know some parents have started taking their kids up to the Highland Lutheran preschool and stuff. There's been like a diversification. There's been some shuffling of some preschool teachers, and I don't know what happened, but I guess Max said that they're shut down, so there's been some preschool drama. But you're right, it does use. And then, is North Fork, able to add on? Can there be a wing added to a school? Do we have to procure real estate? I don't know. And then, like I say, I'm really big about everybody pulling on that rope, and I'm afraid that if we raise that number, it's going to just make it that worse of a taste for ever getting Cowlitz County on board and all of the development that happens on the Cowlitz side upriver.
I mean, truthfully, if you put 5th grade back into the elementary school where it should be, they are already over capacity, because each class is going to, at this point, we're around anywhere between 150 to 170 students. So if you put those kids where they're supposed to be, we're over capacity. They've been shifting kids around because of the cost of building the schools, where we're still paying the bond for the high school, all of that kind of thing. And it's because in the past things have been kicked down the road. We'll just deal with it later, And so we, rather than building an elementary school, we built an intermediate school. So then you had K through 2nd grade was at what's now Columbia Elementary School. You had an intermediate school. So like if you had 4 kids, you could be going to 4 places if you're picking your kids up, because you have got to go somewhere. Like, things have been kicked down the road for a while, and it's catching up. So I mean, I think that there needs to be impact fees, but the frustration is some of the things are not out of our control, and the impact fees don't necessarily help.
Cliff?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good point. If we're over capacity, what are we gonna do? I don't have an answer.
Is it the burden of just the construction in Woodland to fund a new school? Is it the burden of, we have 2,000 some homes in Woodland, and we expect another 670 in the next 20 years? Whereas we know there's going to be a lot of growth upriver. We see it all the time. Green Mountain Road, the cement trucks go up there every day, and at least we get something from Clark County, but we don't know what. But if that's not even in this calculations, this is just, is it the burden of just our new construction? And I also have a feeling that, especially on the multifamily, if you increase the cost of multifamily by $14,000 a unit, you're going to increase the cost of all the multifamily rents in town. You increase the cost of just a house by $10,000 on a house permit. The cost for a family to buy a house is going to go up. A rising tide rises all boats, and it will definitely happen there with the real estate. So that's another opinion I have.
So it's not an increase of 14,000. So what the current one is right now is 5,900.
Yeah.
For the multifamily, and it would go up to that. But we're also then.
I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, it's still a big increase, but it's also the impact fees are. This is what they're charging for all of Clark County. So, I mean, are we asking less than every other community is asking for their impacts?
Is there a way to Google that, find out what a school impact fee is in the Clark County portion of?
So it is currently the same as our rate.
Okay.
But each school district in Clark County will be different based on their capacity needs.
When was the last time the school impact fees were changed?
6 years ago. That's the 2019 number.
So part of it is you see the huge jumps because it's not looked at except for every 6 years and the cost exponentially. But I also already know, like when you look at building a new house, the average state fees that you pay is around $72,000 per home that the state takes from the builders. So so I mean, realistically, we've gotten to the point. This is why housing isn't affordable anymore. It isn't necessarily even the impact fees. It's the fact that right now, building in the state of Washington, the average is around $90,000 between your state and local impact fees to build a home.
So, I haven't built a house since 2014, and I built the whole house for $110,000, 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So, where have those taxes come from? What are they taxing? What are the impact fees?
This is from talking to a home builder that does, like subdivisions. That's what they're paying in state fees per unit, which is why you're now up to like $500-600 a square foot to build a house. Most home builders will tell you right now that they can't upgrade to a new home because of how expensive it is, and that's part of what's causing the trap in the housing is because of the fact that you have interest rates that are 8%. So anybody who's in a 4% loan isn't jumping to their next home because they don't want an 8% loan, and you also have cost prohibitive building. So you don't have people getting into the rental market because the other people won't leave to go that would have moved up into, like, they want a different house. They want something nicer than what they've been.
Yeah. All I know is I see it in my insurance because they tell me it's going to cost $600,000 to replace my dumb old house.
Yeah.
So,
But one of the biggest problems I think I have with all of the impact fees, as far as when you're talking about the schools, is it doesn't matter if you're building a 1-bedroom house or a 10-bedroom house. Your impact fees are the same. When obviously a 1-bedroom house is not going to be putting in the students that a 10-bedroom house would be doing, and I don't know how to solve that or if it's ever been looked at.
I would like to have had them here to ask them if, a new building on new land was the only means to fulfill this,
But irregardless, they're almost to capacity at the high school again already. So regardless of whether you're talking about an elementary school, a middle school, whatever, the capacity it's hard because they're not all on one page. It'd be nicer if they were so you're not having to flip back and forth. But yeah.
Comment on this?
Sure.
So as far as capacity goes, I know you mentioned about the middle school and high school.
Yeah.
So right now, per section 5, table A, they have a summary there about what their capacity needs are.
Yeah.
And the capacity, well, there's two. There's one on section 4, and then that shows the throughout the years, and then section 5 kind of gives a summary for 2031, so in 5 years. I think Travis can also pull that up on the big screen. It's page four.
Page 4?
Sorry, one more down, Travis. One more. Section 5 right there,
Yeah.
just a little lower.
So if you increase the high school by 130 kids, so let's say some of the kids don't go to running start, you're over, I mean, that's part of what allows you to have capacity at the high school as well.
Yeah, I guess from a 2031 perspective, yeah, in 5 years, yeah, they're showing increase of 38 students for the middle schools. Now, I know you mentioned some kids, elementary kids are in there, so,
Yeah.
but so far, and maybe this is where the previous table, just one page back, Travis, it's that one kind of shows it better throughout the years as far as what the capacities are. So the capacity of middle schools, which middle schools K through 8, right now it's showing it's 846. So we see in 2025 it's the demand is 791, 806, 822, 837. So it looks like there's a capacity demand for 846 not until 2029 for the middle schools. And then for the high schools, they're saying the capacity is 866 students versus the demand right now is 737. So they will, as the years go by, in 2031, they're saying they're going to have 837 student demand, and they have a capacity for 866. So what they're saying is, and I'm just saying this is their data, But what they're saying is, the middle school doesn't have any issues till 2029. High school doesn't have any issues in the next 5 years. They're primarily saying it's just elementary.
But if you're having issues with two schools and you've got to build now an elementary school and a middle school, we're far behind on our impact fees.
If you have, I think it's mostly about the impact fees, how they, once again, going back to how they typically get collected.
Yeah.
Right. It's, if you're going to collect it, you have to show capacity needs. And
Yeah.
so you can start collecting them, but you can only start collecting once you've determined like a failure in the system or a break in the system. Like a development usually will not be allowed if like a sewer pump station doesn't have adequate capacity. At that point, it's like, okay, then you start paying, upgrading it. But if there's sufficient capacity, right, then you don't start increasing, or I guess you don't start making formulas, I guess the way they're doing the calculations, for increased capacity above the impact that you're introducing, if that makes sense.
Right, but you're also planning for years ahead of time of the impact, not just that year.
Yeah,
So you can't
takes 5 years to
every
permit
6
it.
years build a school.
Right.
So it has to be more forward than 6 years.
Well, correct. And so that's why I think this is a good 5-year plan, and that's why it needs to follow like the capacity demand incrementally, right? So as the capacity rises, and Travis, is there any like reason not, like you mentioned, we haven't increased our fees for X amount of time. Is there any reason why the system development charges can't increase incrementally every year?
They could do that.
I think it's usually because the school is supposed to ask for the change, are they not?
Yep.
And so just,
So
Yeah.
they
it wasn't done before.
Yeah. So
We have a new superintendent, so that's something that they could look at, but in the meantime, you know.
Yeah, I stand for it. If I actually stand a 5-year plan, everything's being done is accurate. It's correct. Like most jurisdictions do this. It's a 5-year plan. You build out the capacity. Now you know what the increments should be as you're increasing the impact fees. But also just to the point that you have to focus on the target. Like we're trying to get to 161 students with impact fees in the next 5 years, right? If that's the current target, that's what the calculation should be based on. Now, next year, you might revise the calculations, right? And you might say, well, a ton of families moved in and everybody found a new religion where they're having 20 children per family, right? Okay, we need to revise our calculations, right? We're now projecting there to be a lot more students. Well, then you redo the calculations, redo the math, and you're like, a 5-year plan, now we increase the...
You can't quite, it's not that black and white though when it's cut and it was not that cut and dry because you can't, there's only so much land available to build on as well. So those impacts as you have less and less land, the impact becomes more and more. Like, so.
Because you have to buy
can't-
the school.
You can't ask for,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this family, they're paying $20,000 for the impact of their student, but this family's paying $40,000 for the impact of their student. Like, that's unreasonable as well.
Right.
So,
Well, I
so like you're trying to judge for the future. Like,
yeah.
Travis can tell you, I've asked any number of times, when was the last time we had a water survey to know how much water we truly have available for
Mhm.
homes? Like, because we need to know what our capacity is,
Mhm.
because I've been at the city when we've had a moratorium on building,
Yeah.
because we didn't have sewer capacity, and we didn't have building of any kind for, whether it be business or residential, for a number of years,
Mhm.
until, and so you could not realistically enter into the system. And so
Mhm.
you like, if you're only planning for 6 years ahead, then you're far behind at 6 years, because you can't then just jump, and you're not necessarily looking at things every single year as a whole. Like, when we're doing the Growth Management Act, we're trying to look at a 20-year period of time and plan for the 20 years.
Mhm.
But we're also getting 6 years of data, trying to plan for 20 years, which is difficult as well. And we
Mhm.
can go back and make incremental changes, but part of it, I think, is sometimes there hasn't been great planning in the past, and now we're paying for that, and which
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. Well, to that point, no, I definitely understand. To that point, if the math, like right now, the 5-year plan, if the mathematics, if they showed that in 2031 that there's going to be a capacity need of 400 students, I would not be up
Well,
here.
realistically, I mean, there is, because in the plan, they talk about bringing the 5th grade back out of the middle school. So you're bringing in, now
Mhm.
those aren't new students, but you're shift, so the school that needs to be built, if you build a 400 student school, you're gonna be mostly full with that
Mhm.
school as well. And then you're like still into the problem
Yeah.
of, now we have 3 elementary schools that are mostly full, but we're doing better at the middle school,
Right.
you know?
Right. Now you have like a gap or such empty classrooms in the middle school, right?
And I can truthfully tell you, this started when I was little, because the
Yeah.
Columbia Elementary School was the middle school.
Mhm.
The grades, where the middle school is now, was the grade school. And rather than figuring out a better way to do the schools, they just moved kids from
Mhm.
place to place, not thinking about the fact, or worrying about the fact that, okay, yeah, we have too many grade schoolers, but what happens when they move up to the middle school, and what happens when they move up to the high school? And they truly just kick the can down the road for the last 35 years.
Mhm.
And we are at here now, where you can't just keep kicking the can down the road. I mean, you could have portables everywhere,
Mhm.
but that's not actually a good learning environment for the kids either,
Yeah.
you know?
Well,
But I get it.
that sounds like a good plan. I think David made some really good points too. I think it's perhaps what's needed is maybe an updated plan from the school about if.
No matter what we do talking about this math,
Mhm.
this math has all of the cost for 400 students being paid by impact fees, and aside from the 65% state match.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have anybody else in the district calculated whether they pay or not. So it doesn't have any Clark County calculations. It doesn't have, obviously there's no Cowlitz County calculations, but it doesn't even calculate the students, tell us where those 400 students are coming from
Mhm.
correctly. I know we had years where we had 1 building permit, 2 building permits in the whole year for a house, and we probably had 30 houses added up Green Mountain alone. I was shocked. We went and watched the Christmas ships the other night and turned to come home on the dike, and looking back at Green Mountain, just of course, I hear people complain about the traffic on Lewis River Road and stuff. the construction didn't slow down outside of the city limits, and those impact fees, you know, are non-existent up there, but that growth and that pressure on the school has still happened. You know, this puts, I think this puts, adding to the impact fees, the impact fees themselves are a disproportionate burden, but adding to them is very much a disproportionate burden, and the math doesn't even work, because all of those students aren't, you know, you can't build a 400 student school and then break it down to the it's 0.33 kids per household or something here, and they're saying, you know, Woodland has 400 homes in the pipeline. It just doesn't add up. That's less than 200 students, and you know, I don't know. I just think the numbers are not supportive of increasing. You know, not to mention, I really do think with we're going to have a point where we're going to be pressured from the county to increase our urban growth boundary, and of course that'll put a few acres into the city. Thank you, Max. But at the same token, maybe that's a little leverage point for us. So, hey, you know, this has been like the fastest growing area in the county, and it's putting pressure on things, and it's not all just the city. You know, we need to be able to collect those impact fees on building permits in the county. You know, so that's maybe a leverage point when we get to that.
I mean, and realistically, it happens because of the ebb and flows. Like, everything is built nowadays for the most part, in subdivisions. So you're gonna get 100 houses and then none for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're gonna get another 100 houses and then none for years. And you have to be able to accommodate for the impact that those 100 houses are gonna impact more than 1 year. So, I mean, there's all the factors that go into it.
Do we have, like, you know, all those new big houses out where the bulb farm was?
Because, I mean, realistically, how many houses are in the subdivisions that have been started?
For us, probably, I believe the number was about 149 last time I looked, and that was when we talked in September. So, I mean, there hasn't been a lot since the last time I looked.
That building permits or lots?
That's building permits that are issued.
But how many lots are in? How many lots are
So
the 3 that are
150 in
on Lewis
Alder
River
and
Road?
Ash. There's I believe it's around 98 for River Walk in that neighborhood. The Lewis River subdivision, which is now being called the Landing, is 89. And then there are a couple apartment complexes that have been approved, one for 24, one for 30, and I want to say 13. So, I mean, the number is pretty considerable.
But that doesn't include the one, there's one missing. So you have the subdivision that's going on right now that's next to North Fork. I don't remember all the names of them.
That's Alder and Ash.
Okay.
It's 150.
And then the one across the street from that.
That's the 90.
Okay, and then the 89.
Yep.
I mean, and then realistically, where else would there be a huge subdivision? There's not. So you have to plan for the impact that these ones are going to be bringing, you know, and unless there's going to be more land or somebody decides, you know, they're going to buy up a bunch of houses and build a subdivision, then like you're going to have these ebbs and flows because people don't just build most people aren't building just a single house anymore like they used to, unless they're in the county. Yeah, I'm answering for Dave.
I watched the meeting, last month's meeting, Cliff. You had a lot to say when I wasn't here.
I think that you got something.
So I'll just say what I said again last time, though, is that the enrollment, and I have a friend who has more time than I, and she had just told me a couple days ago that the enrollment is down again at Woodland schools. Couples are not having so many children. I live on a street, there's 10 houses, there's 2 children that go to school. And there's another development, and there's like about 3 or 4 kids that are sitting there at the bus stop. Now, it could be parents are taking, I'm not sure on that other street, but there's not many that are being picked up. So the need, I don't know how much the need is going to be, and it seems like it's a very big jump in these fees. If there's some way, you know, to make a compromise, like increase the fees, so there is provision being made for the needs for building, but not so much, because that's just a huge jump, and it's like you said, they haven't made any increases in 5-6 years. But that kind of happened with the city with the utility bills too, and they hadn't, and then all of a sudden huge, and so they tried to slowly build it up. And since you can revisit this next year or whatever, could see if things change and you need to keep raising it. Anyway, that's just a thought as I'm listening to the dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
I
Donna.
have a question for Travis. Doesn't somebody in this state do population projections? Can we get our hands on some of that stuff?
So, if you want to come to my office, we can go through that, because we did discuss that in the comprehensive plan. The problem that I continue to bang the drum on, and that is, they do statewide analysis, and they do the best they can, but unfortunately, when you get to small communities like ours, the statistics kind of begin to break down, because as Dave pointed out, you'll get a subdivision and you'll get 150 residential building permits, and then there's years when you'll have 3 or 4, maybe a dozen building permits, and then all of a sudden you'll get another subdivision, because we didn't have a major subdivision between 2012 and 2021. So we show tiny growth numbers for 7-8 years, and then you get a subdivision, and all of a sudden we are the fastest growing community in Cowlitz County, and then it goes back to 0, 0, 0 because there's no new subdivisions.
But we can kind of look at 6 years in the future and do a guesstimate, can we?
Yes.
Okay.
So, and Dave pointed out that we kind of estimated that we have enough capacity for about 670 units in about 700 units in our current urban growth boundary and the city. And if you look at the numbers that the city, or that the school district uses, and that is 0.4 or 0.25 or 0.3, even just doing the math like Max pointed out, you know, that's somewhere between 200 and 250 students over the next 20 years.
Is that elementary or
All students. And then of course you look at this number, so let's say we just take $10,000. If we get 200 students over the next 20 years at $10,000, that's $2 million. And then of course the house, or the price of that school, we know from the last 6 years it's gone from 13 million to 32 million. That $2 million was a lot when you look at 6 years ago, when it was only a $13 million school. They'd be in good shape, but unfortunately that $2 million won't mean anything in 20 years, because the school price will be, you know, 100 million by that point. But as Whitney's pointing out, if you don't have the student growth, you won't need an elementary school, so you're not going to waste 100 million, let alone the 32 million, which
Okay, I
is
have
the
a
point that.
question for Max, if you had your druthers, what, that 400 student projection number, what would you make it?
So you're asking what I think the actual growth is going to be? Okay, for my age group right now, I'll say personally.
I'm not gonna hold you to it.
Yeah, yeah. So my age group right now, the struggle is I have friends that got married, and the struggle has been a lot of them still live in apartments. I was fortunate enough, I was very frugal from a very young age, and I started putting money away. I actually put my money into like a IRA or whatever, and then I took a loan against that to buy my first house. So it was a struggle for me. I drive like a 25-year-old truck. I barely spend any money, and I was able to, afford a home here in Woodland, and we have to, get way outside of the city. A lot of my friends live in apartments, and their number one struggle is they're holding off on having children because they can't afford homes. And and it's a struggle because maybe many of you have, I don't know if you have not had children, but you start having kids, they need space to run around. You want to be kind of in a nicer neighborhood where you could go on a walk. So a lot of people are just, my age group, they're holding off because of housing. And my perspective, and I'm not the only one who shares this opinion, I think some people out there that are smarter than I am are starting to voice concerns of decline in population or population decline rather than population growth. And the other consideration is I come from more of a conservative community, and a lot of us, people I'm around are questioning whether we want to send kids to public schools given some of the things that we've seen happen in Portland. Like, we moved further away from Portland. Once again, I'm not going to question everybody's beliefs or opinions, but we're here in Woodland for a reason. And so then it becomes a question of, even if there is a public school, do we feel safe on sending our children there? And where our discussions with my wife is, we might want to just even homeschool depending on what the climate is like in the schools. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Even it's, number one, people my age aren't having kids, and when we are having them, now we're getting scared to send them to schools, well, at least in the community that I'm a part of. As far as the numbers go, like I'll get back into my math brain. I believe it's right. When calculations are being formulated, and just the way the laws and everything works, it has to be proportionate. It has to be capacity based. So when making decisions, coming from a professional engineering world and and the ethical standards that I have to adhere to, you have to base your decisions based on the data, right? I can say I don't want schools, but if the data shows that they're needed, I will vote for it, or I have to approve and move forward with that plan. I would say, that's why I think it's important for there to be validity in the school's plans, backed by mathematical evidence to, determine capacity and the impact, and then you base your decision off of that. From everything that I'm seeing, is my opinion really doesn't matter.
What you mean?
Yeah, but I'm saying I'm saying
that was the end of the sentence.
yeah. My frankly, what really matters is from a legal standpoint, how the plan was formulated, whether the mathematics are correct, is the capacity being determined adequately. Right now, I'm seeing in a 5-year projection, 161 demand. They want to charge impact fees based on 400 capacity. I believe that is incorrect. If they revise their plan and show a 400 student demand, and they can back up that claim, by all means, base your impact fees on that claim. But first, you have to prove the fact that you have a demand for 400 students. Now, next year, if they come back and they, like I said, there's an influx, maybe these subdivisions start growing, they actually show birth rates are up in Woodland, the math supports their claim of we need 400 impact fees. You incrementally start raising, you start collecting the funds for that school just so the capacity is available for those children. So, like I said, it's a two-part response. On one part, I can see that from a personal standpoint, I'm happy to be in Woodland. Everything I hear about Woodland schools, it seems to be good feedback. Unfortunately, the preschool wasn't canceled because of drama. We were told specifically the preschool was canceled due to low enrollment. Right? It was going to be our 3-year-old son and 2 other kids. So they're like, we can't sponsor the teacher. So it was low enrollment. And so that's my opinion. I think if they're claiming 161 base year SDCs based on that, run the math. It's not 78,000 per student or whatnot. What they need. It's not that 28 million. It's about what's half of 161. It's whatever 40% of that. Base year SDCs off of that, I would say base year SDC off of their schedule that they provided, the yearly schedule, and if they want more fees, revise the math and ask for it.
Thanks. Okay, so I think what we're looking at is, if we want to build another school, it's going to cost us $28 million? Whatever it was, $30 million, based on 400 students, and we don't need a school yet for 400 more students. That's kind of my bottom line.
Okay. I just happen to be looking at our current and in effect comprehensive plan, which,
I have a question.
okay.
Since there's a lot of questions that we don't have, and Donna's here already, and she was at the school board meeting, so I'm assuming they're done. So, and certain weeks of theirs are their short weeks, and I don't remember which because of what business that they do. But maybe we have the people come from the school board and have it at the last thing on the agenda, so that they can go to both meetings, and we can, when we're asking these questions, we can say we can get actual answers instead of just supposing, and then
Well, I think
try to make decisions off of assumptions.
That's a wonderful observation, because I've never known Donna to leave a meeting early, and,
Or could we go to their location and, is that a problem?
if they start a half hour sooner, and if
I
they're.
thought they started at 6:15 or something, 6:30. Yeah.
So, yeah, we can put that, like, on next month's agenda and put it at the back of the agenda and facilitate them being there and have all our questions for them and, give them the chance that, because I think we all agree we have questions that only they can answer, so.
Travis, can you find out if they've ever done school impact fees based on bedrooms of homes that are being built?
Yes, I can look into that.
Well, if that's the case, then I'm not gonna start quoting the comp plan right now. You guys could make a motion to, continue this to the next meeting with an emphasis on putting it at the back of the agenda.
Because I mean, I realistically, I don't, even though you're providing for the community as a whole, I think it's unrealistic if you're a community that, let's say you're a community that has more people that are coming in that are like 55 and older, and the people that aren't having kids and things like that. It's a very different landscape of what you're bringing in for impacts than if you're bringing in families that are coming in. And neither one is wrong, but like your plan has to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I know that originally the development across from North Fork, what is that called again?
That one is Riverwalk.
Riverwalk. That was originally going to be a 55 and older, and so, I mean, realistically, the chances are you're not going to have a lot of students coming from that, even if you could build a mansion and not have a lot of students.
I think it's when you look at all the other stuff that's on our agendas that we're looking to deal with, I think that's a good thing to look into, because, we have to create more affordable housing, which is typically related to size, units, per lot and things of that nature. We're gonna be, hopefully making some smart changes in those categories just to meet the state requirements. And on Travis and I were talking before the meeting because we have our PU, Planned Unit Residential Code. And in that, it'll allow, multiple units on one lot in a neighborhood. It's a planned neighborhood. So you can have a house and a couple of 800 square foot. And then that was a discussion, is do we call those residences, do we call those homes, or do we call those ADUs? Or, we have to kind of define some of these things and put them in boxes and say, yes. And some of our PURD stuff, if you made a section of it, a courtyard of it, 55 and over, that would be kind of a different classification as well. So I think those are great questions to ask and things to look into, especially after we go through the next couple of items we have on here. So
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, the fees have to be changed because the costs have changed in the last 6 years. But I'm not sure that we know what exactly they should be.
So the code does have an exemption for seniors housing if it's specifically designed for seniors housing, and it would be exempt from school impact fees.
So, should we just make a motion to continue, or do we want to give a list of questions that we're going to ask, or just have him work on that, finding out that per bedroom type?
I move that we table the discussion on school impact fees until the January meeting and move it to the end of the agenda and invite the school.
So, sorry to interrupt you. We need to make sure that that includes a specific date and time for that continuance for it to be legally noticed. So that would be, sorry.
I only know when
let's
we
call
go
it
from a 31-day month to a 30.
January 15th at 7 o'clock p.m. in this room right here.
Let's call it a continuance, not a tabling. We'll continue the public hearing.
Yeah, sure.
Donna
So
likes
maybe.
that. She goes to a lot of meetings. And Max, thank you for all your involvement and input.
That's January 16th is a Friday.
She said 15th.
Oh, okay, then I misheard.
It's all right.
No, it's not.
Max, you were really helpful with the stuff with the lodging tax stuff when you got up and made your testimony. Between you and Donna, you guys knocked it out of the park.
I wasn't planning on speaking that
Yeah.
night. Concerned citizen.
Yeah. Did you go to Winterfest?
I have been working so much. I haven't.
Oh, the kid. It was a Saturday. It was
Yeah, I've been working Saturdays too, but
it was a really good time.
I've been to some of the just general events, and I've been staying in touch with them now about some of their outreach and what they're doing. So I'll try to make it to more events.
That's wonderful. Okay, so we got a date. Do you want me to repeat that motion for Travis?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if traffic needs it or not.
Whitney moved to continue the public hearing on our January 15th meeting and have it be the last thing on the agenda.
Okay.
And we'll notify the school superintendent that that's what's happening. I need a second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. I once again have played with my papers until Actually, guess we should have probably formally closed the public hearing.
No, because you continued
Because
it.
we're continued,
Yep.
okay. All right, there it is. All right, so we have an action item of approving the minutes from last month's meeting, November 20 minutes.
Okay, could you check the minutes? Could you bring up the minutes? Because I believe that you've got Robin Zorch on them.
Yeah. I saw that. I wondered if I got replaced.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize. If you remember, Amanda was doing the minutes from home because
Oh,
I
yeah.
was the only one in the room at that time. So I think she didn't realize that. Yeah, so Robin should be replaced with Whitney.
Yeah, and she's still on the website too, as, listing the members.
Keeps me out of trouble.
Okay,
for
so-
being on there. That was me that was gone.
You're not responsible.
Is it motions made to approve the minutes with that correction?
Yes.
By Sharon?
Yes, I move that we approve the minutes with the correction for changing Robin Zorch.
All right. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we have a discussion / workshop on how we're going to plan for the State House Bill 1337 regarding accessory dwelling units. We'll start with some PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. So for the record, my name is Travis Goddard, Community Development Director for the City of Woodland. The chair had asked me at previous meetings to break things down a little differently than they had been presented to you, and I'm sorry I didn't get the staff reports updated in time for the publishing. So I'm going to cover it here, and hopefully you'll be able to give me the thumbs up as to whether or not this is what you're looking for. The ordinance the House bill, which is attached to the agenda packet, you've seen a couple times. I wanted to just go through and pull out the bullet points, because if you read it, I have to read it multiple times to make sure I get this, which is why I'm doing it in bullet form. So, the idea behind this House bill is it's about the housing affordability crisis that has been declared in Washington State. And the idea is we need more housing across the income spectrum. And the majority of residential zoning is for detached single-family residential zones, and that's true for the city across the entire state. And the accessory dwelling units are considered to be a way to address affordability because it creates an additional tool, but that the existing codes don't necessarily provide for that tool belt. So what this code does is it looks for adding diversity in the houses, in the types and sizes. It creates housing opportunities throughout every neighborhood instead of just certain neighborhoods. And it gives more families, especially in the lower income brackets, the access to good housing, schools, and parks that are enjoyed in these single family residential neighborhoods. Statistically, across the state, we know that accessory dwelling units tend to go for below market rates, and Max is a great example where he would be looking at providing one where he might not have revenue, but the other one would be market rate. So right off the bat, we have testimony that 50% of the ones that Max is looking at would have below market rates. So it also provides options for very low income households like his parents is exactly what he's talking about. So in this case, it allows for aging in place for seniors and for family care opportunities like he's mentioned. And one of the issues that was brought up in the testimony previously, and that is it also provides flexibility for say if you are a senior and you live in this community and you have a 2,000 square foot house, you can build yourself an ADU for 800 square feet and rent the 2,000 square foot house because you don't need the 2,000 square feet. So now you can age in place, live on your property, and not necessarily have to take the full house as yourself, but it provides an additional option for aging in place. And that's the added income and sense of security, having additional people around, like for Max's parents, that idea that they're close to each other. There's environmental benefits. It reduces sprawl. You don't need to expand through the urban growth boundary or annexation process. Reduces commute times, increases density, and provides affordable options. So Section 3 of the bill brings up some procedural stuff, and that is we have to adopt some additional code to meet these accessory dwelling unit standards within 6 months of adoption of our comprehensive plan. So theoretically, our 6 months should start February 5th, when the new comp plan goes into effect. Or I'm sorry, it might be January 18th, I believe, is when it goes into effect.
So has it been adopted by?
It has not. The second reading is expected on January 5th at the first meeting of the new year. So, and I have an update for that at the end. So,
Okay.
If not adopted, the RCWs preempt our code. So, if we don't make some of the decisions, it will be automatically implemented, and the discretion is not at the city anymore. So changes are not subject to legal challenge. So meaning if there's an environmental group that does or does not want certain sections to be adopted, there is no adoption or appeal to court or the Growth Management Hearings Board. It is what it is, whatever the county decides to adopt, provided it's found to be consistent with the RCWs by the Department of Commerce. And one of the other conditions that's noted in there, and that is the city cannot authorize accessory dwelling units where other restrictions apply. So for example, if there's a wetland piece of property and it's not buildable because of critical area constraints, we cannot authorize the construction of ADUs in wetlands or in shorelines or in city right-of-way or those kind of things. Or if there's no water or sewer service, we can't authorize accessory dwelling units because there's no services. So now Section 3 also says the city we may restrict short-term rentals. So in other words, we can say that they cannot be used for Airbnb. They have to be long-term rentals. We can require all health, safety, and permitting codes unless it's contrary to the section coming up. But generally, like building codes, fire codes, electrical codes, we can require those for obvious reasons. We can prohibit accessory dwelling units on septic systems. So, for example, if there's inadequate sewer capacity and a pump station needs to be upgraded, we can't authorize ADUs on septic systems until that pump system is upgraded. And ADUs in floodplains and other critical areas cannot, we cannot prohibit them. Oh, sorry, we may prohibit them in floodplains and that kind of stuff. So now Section 4 of the code talks about policies that must be followed when we go through this exercise, and that is impact fees are limited to 50%. That's limited to. So for example, the current impact fee is $5,900, but ADUs only charge $2,000. So right now, our impact fees are only 33% or 30% of the single-family residential rate. So we can go less, and as you've been discussing, ADUs have less impact because they're likely to be small, and our code currently addresses that by having lower ADU rates. We can no longer have the residency requirement, and we'll get into that in our code because it says the property owner must live in either the ADU or the primary residence. We can no longer require that. Also, our code currently says that the number of people who can live in a residence are limited. We can no longer do that either because we can't regulate what the definition of a family is, because it's no longer families less than 10 people, which I think is what our code says. They can only have 10 people living in a structure, and that's no longer true, because if you have a family of 12, mother, a father, and 10 kids, that's a family, and we can't regulate whether it's considered residence or not. Also, it says that instead of one ADU, that we have to allow for at least 2 ADUs on a lot, and they can be one detached, one attached. It can be 2 detached. It can be 2 attached to the existing residence or some combination. So we must allow for detached structures. It also talks about we must allow for any lot that meets the minimum lot size. We have to allow ADUs on it. The maximum size cannot be less than 1,000 square feet. So our code currently says it has to be between 300 square feet at a minimum and 800 square feet at the maximum. So we're at a minimum, we would have to change our code from 3,000 or 300 to at least 1,000 at the maximum end. Also, we cannot have a maximum height of less than 24 feet unless the house itself is limited to less than 24 feet. And right now, all of our residential zones allow for more than 24 feet in height, so the ADU would have to be able to be more than 24 feet. The code also says that where there are alleys, you have to be able to allow ADUs at the alley line, and typically that's kind of with the idea that in old neighborhoods with alleys, typically the garage is right on the alley, and so if you wanted to build a second story on that garage, that it would be non-conforming to a regular zoning setback, but you have to allow it in those cases. You could also convert that garage to an ADU, and it would still be right on the property line and doesn't meet normal zoning setbacks, but that is allowed by code under this. We have to allow that to happen. We also have to allow existing buildings to be converted to ADU. That's the example of the garage that's right on the alley. We have to allow for those to be converted to an ADU. Or if they have a shop, it can be converted to an ADU, or they can add an ADU to it. Even if it's non-conforming for setbacks and coverage.
So the meeting time, the Zoom timed out because of 40 minutes with no activity. So there was nobody on it. We need to sign it back in. We just took all the wind out of Travis's sails right there. Where's your mom going? Oh, she's gonna discipline a kid. Okay. Google. Why you take routes as long as me? question right there, since
Sure.
we're kinda right there?
Sure.
So, does that mean like in Meriwether, where there's no room on the lot for anything, could they convert a garage to an ADU?
So our zoning code specifically says you have to have 2 covered parking spaces on a residential lot. If you can convert your garage and you still have covered parking, then you would not be in violation.
Okay.
So I can't say yes or no because it's case lot by lot.
Well, I just, right down there where it says, allow existing buildings to be converted, even if non-conforming for setbacks, but we're still able to have that code
Yes.
for the 2 covered parking.
Yes.
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And I think we're gonna get back to that again later on because that is covered. Yep. So we also may not impose greater standards for setbacks, tree retention, entry door locations, aesthetics, or design review than the single-family residential. So in other words, if we don't have design standards for single-family homes, we cannot have them for accessory dwelling units. So for example, Leavenworth, Washington, that kind of Bavarian town, if you have standards for Bavarian designed homes with the A-frame roof, then the ADU would have to have that same design. But since we don't have anything like that, we can't require our ADUs to have design standards that don't apply to the home.
Does our code require doors to face the street?
Our code currently has design standards, and one of the recommendations is we're going to have to remove that. Because our code says you cannot have an ADU facing, that has a door facing the street. And we're going to have to remove that.
At a house, we require a house to have a door facing the street. Because when we did the mobile home code, that was one of the requirements there, that the door, it's a fire department thing. That,
So
you know, the
that's,
firemen need to find the victim. So I think that's probably why it was on the ADU thing too. And it's probably in our
I'll have to check that.
residential design standards as well.
Okay.
It might just be a fire department thing too.
That might, yeah. Okay, so I will have to look at that. We also may not prohibit the sales of accessory dwelling units as a condo, which is an extremely interesting thing for them to put in the code, because condominiums have fallen out of favor because of all of the issues associated with insuring condominiums and that. So
How exactly would that, how would you sell? Because it also tells you you cannot separate it.
you would condominiumize it and sell it as a condominium unit.
Would it need to be an attached one then? Or even if it's unattached, it would be considered a condominium?
Yeah, you're right. So if it's attached, it would be a condominium. If it is a detached, you could just sell it, and it would be
So
a.
technically, somebody could convert their garage, sell it as a condominium. How does that work with like the deed of the house anymore?
Or in that case, it would be more like a manufactured home that's on a lot in a manufactured home park. That's what it would be more akin to than a condominium.
You get a stack of paperwork about that thing.
I just, some of these things
No.
I see causing real problems.
Some of these things are more expensive to do than anybody's ever gonna do. You know, that's just cost prohibitive too.
Unless the corporations are buying, because corporations are buying property.
Yeah.
So they have no personal interest, they do whatever they can do to make money.
So much. Comes to mind.
Yeah, I've boy, I have tough time seeing something like that financeable or something, and they're gonna do something that's gonna sell. You know, I just,
Now, a key is that it says we cannot prohibit it. What's interesting is I might have to talk to the attorney about what kind of conditions could you put on it. Because that might be a way to deter that, in that they would have additional paperwork that needs to be done in order to sell it, to make it a sellable unit. So. We also may not trigger public street improvements. So, for example, if, for example, Max were to live on an undeveloped road and he wanted to add an ADU, we couldn't make him put in half-width road improvements plus water and sewer upgrades and curb gutter and sidewalk. That's not the intent, to keep these cheaper to construct. We also may not require parking if it is within a half mile of a major transit stop. And we do not have to worry about that because we do not have a major transit stop, which is specific under this ordinance. We also may not require more than one parking space per unit if the lot is less than 6,000 square feet or before any zero lot line subdivision. And we may not require more than 2 parking spaces per unit if the lot is greater than 6,000 square feet before any zero lot line subdivision. Where this comes in is we have a short plat on Park Street where they are proposing 3 lots, and each one of those lots will have an accessory dwelling unit, and so we required them to have 3 parking spaces per lot, because we know that eventually they're going to have 2 for the home plus 1 for the ADU. So we could not require more if this code was in place, but we didn't do that in anyways. So just, that's one of the new conditions that's coming up.
Well, wouldn't each of the lots be less than 6,000 square feet then?
What's that? Oh, they are,
Depend
they,
on the
they
square
are more
footage
than
of the lot.
6,000 square feet, yeah.
I mean, 'cause you didn't say the size of the lot. The
Yeah.
original lot,
And then the other option is a divider can do a study, or I'm sorry, if we want to do more, we would have to do a study of the neighborhood, which basically shows that there's inadequate parking in the neighborhood and any accessory dwelling units would be detrimental to the parking in the neighborhood, and that's the only way we could justify more parking than the minimums that are required here, or the maximums that are required here. So it does provide an out for severely underparked neighborhoods, but I don't know whether the city would want to engage in that type of parking study for citywide or on individual project related basis. But it's there, so I just wanted to give you that heads up. Now, there are policies that must be followed. So, for example, we may limit properties to 2 ADUs if the lot is less than 2,000 square feet. But we don't have many of those in the city. There's a couple here and there in the downtown area, but not a lot of those. We also may restrict accessory dwelling units on any lot that has critical areas or buffers. So, for example, if it's on the Lewis River, we could, or Horseshoe Lake, we could limit it on those lots. So that's kind of section 4, which is kind of where the meat and potatoes of this section are. Any questions so far?
so it's 5 minutes to 9,
Okay.
and we're kind of halfway into this, but if we're looking at our code in a Reader's Digest version, how many, we have to change the one ADU lot to two. We have to change the ownership requirement to non-exist. We have to look at the front door location. And then we might have to, I don't know about some of these things in our ADU code. If we don't require half-street improvements or any triggers for SEPAs or anything like that, right? So that's kind of what I was kind of hoping for, was a side to side. They want us to have this, we already have this, we need to change.
Yes, we'll get to that.
Okay,
Yep. So that's where we're going as soon as we get through some of these couple more.
All right.
Almost there.
okay.
Okay. So section 5, to encourage ADUs for long-term housing, some of the things we can do is waive or defer fees. That includes impact fees. And we can also waive specific regulations if we chose to. But it would require that those ADUs have a binding commitment or covenant for long-term use. So you can't cut them a bunch of breaks and then have them run it as an Airbnb, because it doesn't add housing to the community. It's not the purpose of the accessory dwelling units. So section 6, which basically says, again, not subject to administrative or judicial appeals. And then it's also not appealable to the Growth Management Hearings Board. Section 8 is we need to review our development regulations for compliance with this code, and it's required as part of the periodic update. I covered that earlier. Sections 9 through 12 are the various condominium and subdivision codes, and basically what it says is, unless there is a reason to protect public health and safety, ground or surface waters, and on-site wastewater septic systems, the city may not impose any restrictions except for those allowed in section 4, and the city is not liable for issuing permits for ADUs if it's in violation of CC&Rs and deed restrictions. So if somebody is in a neighborhood that has CC&Rs that prohibits accessory dwelling units, they come into my office and apply for a permit. I'm obligated to approve that permit, but it doesn't protect them from being sued by their neighbors in civil court, and the city cannot be sued for issuing that permit. I'm obligated to issue the permit, and we incur no liability. It's your responsibility to work it out with your homeowners association. So that's true for whether you condomize it or do an ADU. Okay, so the code sections, which one of the things you asked me for is the side-by-side, and so I didn't do it exactly side-by-side, but we're getting into that because I did do this list of the sections which are going to be affected. So, for example, there are some definitions that need to be fixed. Our existing accessory dwelling unit is long, and it talks about a second dwelling unit either in or added to existing detached dwellings. The new definition is much simpler, and that is accessory dwelling units means a dwelling instead of second dwelling. A dwelling located on the same lot as a single family house. So in other words, you can't have an empty lot and put in 2 ADUs. It has to be accessory to the existing one. And so it can go into duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, and other housing units. So if you have a 4-plex, you can do ADUs on that lot with a 4-plex, provided you can meet the code.
Question, if you're building, like if you're building a primary residence, could you build the ADU first so you could live in the ADU while the primary residence is being built?
So the ADU would technically be the primary residence. So you could build a 600 square foot house, and then you could apply for a second unit, and
But then you would be limited on size.
as long as your ADU is built, or as long as your small unit is built to the ADU standards, then we would recognize that, yeah, the big house is being built second. So I think that's a process-related thing that we would just allow that to happen, recognizing that one is designed for an ADU, and eventually it'll become the ADU when the big house is built. So,
So then could you reverse that too? If you had
Yep.
wanted to build a bigger house than the primary house, and that new house becomes the primary and the other one becomes the ADU?
yes, which is why that section said you have to allow detached and attached, or the other. So it's not you don't have to pick a lane until much later. And the good question, Whitney, is do you want to put that in code, or do you just want to rely on staff to recognize that they'll build one and then the other, we don't care which is first? Or do you want to limit it to the primary has to be there before you do the ADU? That's a policy issue that you can make a recommendation on.
I just think it helps with a lot of the people who try to live in an RV while they're building their house and in that whole situation, because like it's not like they're choosing to, but like if most people can't afford rent somewhere while they're building their house, and so they choose to do that. So that's why I thought of it.
Yep. Okay, and then the other code that I think we need to fix, and that is we have a definition for guest house, which is a living quarters with an accessory building for the sole use of the occupants of the the premises, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to remove that altogether because it falls under that. Every unit is going to be considered an accessory dwelling unit, whether it's a gatehouse or a cottage house or a tiny home. It's all considered an ADU now, so this is something we need to clean up and delete. And then there's also some issues in our multifamily and high density and also our commercial zones, because our zoning code does say that you can have single family detached dwelling, and so we need to add a reference in each one of those zoning sections that says accessory dwelling units. If it's a single family home, you can add an ADU, but if it's a home like above the business, you can't add ADUs or convert the commercial building to ADUs under this code section. So it's one of the quirks in our code, because we do allow single family homes in virtually all of our zones. In some cases, like in our industrial district, if you have an existing single family home, it is a permitted use, and by this code, what it would say is you can start adding ADUs to it. So we need to clarify that if you're going to add ADUs, they need to meet the ADU code. So so that's just more of it's not really a policy issue, it's just making sure that we're catching all of the cross-references throughout our code.
And that would also then preclude like someone having an industry and trying to build a place to live on.
Potentially, yeah. There's also another quirk in our code, which is our manufactured home parks and subdivisions. Density of a manufactured home park shall not exceed 8.5 units per acre of gross density. So gross being the total square footage, not excluding easements and right-of-way and roads, versus net is where you exclude that out and calculate the density. And this is kind of a question that you'll need to address, and that is, should accessory dwelling units count as units in a mobile home park, or do you think they should not count? So somewhere like 369 Gun Club, I forget the name of the park, but the idea is they have a density which is probably close to 8.5, and do we want to envision that they will start adding accessory dwelling units in the mobile home parks? Because if you want that to occur, then the answer is no, it shouldn't be part of the density calculation. But if you think that's too dense and the parking becomes a problem, then you want it to count towards the density. Because then only the big lots would be able to add ADUs.
Well, and with that, at 369 Gun Club and like most manufactured parks, you don't own the property, you rent the property. So then you could have a landlord putting an ADU on where your trailer, your mobile home is sitting.
I didn't even
So,
think about that.
Are our 369 Gun Club, is that on high-density residential zone?
I believe it is medium dense.
MDR,
I
so
think
it's
it
not, so it's not LDR then. So
It
we're
is.
looking at ADUs in the LDR.
So ADUs in any zoning district that allows single-family homes. So that's why I pointed out it could apply to light industrial, it could apply to commercial, and it could apply to all residential. Because we allow single-family homes in every district.
I just kind of curious if that's even a possibility. Is logistically, fire departmentally, there's just so much there. I don't even know if that's really a tree we need to bark up.
Yes. So, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is you're going to have a combination of decisions, and that is it should count towards density. And if you're not going to waive regulations like the fire code and the building code, you're never going to get ADUs in mobile home or manufactured home parks. But if you wanted to go rogue, you theoretically could waive all of that, and the park owner could start adding ADUs all across the mobile home park where the math works. So that's a policy recommendation that you are either going to have to prevent or
I mean,
encourage.
realistically, I could see the people who own that doing whatever they could to just get more money, regardless of how many people that hurt. So.
All right, well, that's further study. I just,
That's why I'm presenting it
Yeah.
this way instead of a side-by-side, because it's starting to get deeper and deeper. Again, here's the central business district, which allows single-family homes. Neighborhood and C3 and C2 will allow this, so there are ways to prevent that, but we're just going to add some language to make sure you put sideboards on where that would occur on existing units. And then the question about the off-street parking. Because we do have a specific language about two spaces per unit, including the garage or carport space, this is where I would suggest that we, instead of trying to define the parking in the parking section, that we just include it in the ADU section, which is 1716-100, and that's the part we're going to go over section by section. So that's a relatively quick fix. And that covers the slideshow. So unless you have specific questions, I can call up the code section that really has the meat and potatoes of the where is that? My glasses. Okay, so this is our existing code section, and it's 1716-100, and it's the criteria for accessory uses, and section A is the accessory dwelling units. So you'll notice that I gave you a PowerPoint presentation, a printout, and on section 4, see it theoretically, I printed this for you so you could go along and cross off the stuff or take notes if you think we've addressed that, or it's stuff you still think we need to cover. So the first one was pretty easy because our code says one accessory dwelling unit is allowed per legal building lot. as a subordinate use in conjunction with the single-family structure. I recommend that we just change that to 2 ADUs, and that the units may be detached, attached, or a mix of detached and attached. So,
Did any of us get that? I don't guess any of us got the,
Yeah, but I don't have,
It
the
doesn't have the
slides.
correction.
Yeah, it doesn't have the,
so that is on the first slide of section 4.
that's, okay, so it doesn't have the,
doesn't have all
The
the
red-
corrections, yeah.
Oh, your
so it doesn't have all the markouts. So
your version does not. Sorry, I printed you the original.
The original.
The original,
Okay.
yeah.
So, go ahead and, so we're gonna change from 1 to 2, right there. Go ahead and scroll down.
Sorry, here's the existing code language.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've
have
got that.
That we have,
We-
that we have.
But it's, unless you got a red highlighter over there, well, you couldn't tell on our stuff that it was,
No, it's not. So this is only up here because I figured I would type and make the changes that you want as we go. So I just did the first couple as an example for you.
so. In number 1, we're striking the 1 and adding the 2.
Yep.
All right, and then we're adding, these units can be detached, attached, or mixed. Okay, and then in 2, we're striking the whole paragraph?
Yes.
Yes.
And so I will read that to you, and that is either the primary residence or the or the accessory dwelling unit must be occupied by the owner of the property.
Right.
And that's the one that is no longer applicable. We can no longer regulate that.
And then number 3 is the ownership requirements. Okay, no wonder this didn't look right.
Yep, number 3 is the total number of occupants limit, and we can no longer regulate that as well. So our 4th existing standard talks about accessory dwelling units shall not be smaller than 300 square feet and not more than 800 square feet. And this section would change to 1,000 square feet at a minimum. Now you could also increase that to 1,200 or 1,500 or any number you see fit.
Can you make it be a minimum?
You could make the minimum larger or you could make the minimum smaller. 300 square feet, I believe, comes from the building code for the minimum residence size of a living quarters. Sorry, Max, I can't hear you. You want to come up to the mic? And
I was just gonna say, right there it says not more than 1,000, and I think the new code provision says that the maximum cannot be limited more than 1,000, right?
so that's the limit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I guess on that note, when I'm drawing up plans right now for the EDU, and I've been kind of waiting for these meetings, like working with Travis. So when I'm drawing out the plans right now, I tried 1,000 square feet, and I'm kind of coordinating with my parents or whatever, what they want, what they do not want. If it's limited to 1,000, it's a little tight. Like you can potentially fit like one room and one little office space, or maybe another room in there, but you'd run out of space for like a dining room, and so it's 1,000 square feet is a little tight. So right now, like the plans I'm drawing are like 11, 13, somewhere there, and that, I guess, for if you wanted like a 2-bedroom ADU, that's kind of where I'm at. So, if you guys want to limit to 1,000, I can try to shrink it down, but I'll lose like a dining space. So.
I thought that in the whatever they wrote, I thought that had, when I was reading it, I thought that it specified, and I thought it was, that's why I was asking earlier, because I thought it said that you couldn't build more than 40% of what the primary residence was, and that kind of stuff, that was the limit.
So that's criteria number 5, and the square footage of the accessory dwelling unit excluding garage shall not exceed 40% of the total square footage for the primary structure. So that is in here. Now, the reason why I have the highlighted question marks, and that is, you could theoretically argue that each ADU could be 40% of the structure, which means, so say for example, if you had a 2,000 square foot house, it would have to be the minimum of 1,000, but if you have a 3,800 square foot house, you might get 1,400 based on that 40% calculation.
But I thought it was in this EHB, I thought it listed it as well.
Sorry?
In the House bill, I thought it listed it as well, like something about percentages.
I didn't see that. Let's see.
Yeah, to my knowledge, after reviewing it, it just provides a provision that there's no percentages. It's just it can't be limited to less than 1,000.
So we have to allow at least 1,000 as the maximum. Now, what might
So
be?
I always like to go apples to apples. So on CC Street, there's a short plat, 2-lot short plat. Somebody's adding a house to the back of their house. How many square feet is that new house?
Well, I mean, we've a couple houses back there. I want to say they're in the neighborhood of 2,400.
The new house is 2,400.
Yeah.
That's just kind of my deal. How big? I think that's something we have to ascertain here. How big is it an accessory dwelling before it just becomes a house? You know.
Yeah, and that's one of the questions that hasn't been answered. So typically to this point, I've been using the 50% rule. So if it's 50% house, then it becomes a duplex, as opposed, or if it's a 3,000 square foot structure and it's 15 and 15, that's really a duplex. But if it's 3,000 total and it's 2,000 and 1,000, that would be a primary and an accessory dwelling unit. So I think the limiting factor, like in Max's case, he can go to 50% lot coverage. So if he had a 10,000 square foot lot, he could build 5,000 square feet of structure and divide it any way he sees fit, as long as he meets the minimum and maximum.
So the house is already how many square feet?
Like right now, it's 2,000 something in there. I think the focus is like for the ADU, if it's a long-term kind of livability situation, that's kind of what I'm focusing on. It's of course, you know, lot coverage. That's what Trav is talking about. I'm still planning to keep like a larger backyard, and you know, on my particular lot, I have the space for it, and so.
What's the fire department requiring you for spacing?
Mine is going to be attached, so I'll have fire separation between the units and fire-rated walls. So, but it's mostly, I think, I don't want them to be too big because at the end of the day, it's also cost, right? So it's a balance between what is the cost, because I don't want to, you know, spend so much money I can't afford to pay it, and then the other part of it is how livable is it, because, you know, I don't know, like what everybody lives in nowadays, or.
There's in Clark County, a friend of mine just bought a place up in Clark County that, yeah, I think it has 2,000 square foot living spaces in the house. and there's another one not far away that's pretty similar. And my question there is, for the engineer, do you think there would be a difference because you're doing attached? You're just kind of building a bigger house. You have one bigger house, but in the case of a detached, you know, when I think about detached ADUs, you think more tiny homes and mother-in-law setups and things, and would it be a different number for a detached? Is it more, you know, because we're kind of looking at, yes, you're looking at lot coverage, but
Right.
you're just kind of also looking at aesthetics there. And, you know, houses have guest houses and mother-in-law setups and these things, and they're always not real big. They're not a whole house per se.
Yeah.
So is that,
I think that's what they're trying to allow, though, because they're trying to allow multi-generational living on a single lot. That's what they're trying to say, though. And that's what we have to decide
yeah.
with the code.
But I know 1,200 square feet, 1,200 square feet, I built the house for my dad. 1,200 square foot was a whole house. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, dining room, living room, you know, so.
The question kind of, the hard part is, like, when you have the space, like, do you then allow basically the whole lot to be 3 buildings, and there'd be no yard in the back?
No.
Those kind of things. That's where you get into.
Yeah, no, in that case, no. So we're still following like Travis was pointing out, the 50% lot coverage.
Yeah.
So, for example, the lot, it's a residential neighborhood, but my lot is about 13,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And so half of that would be, 7,000 something square feet, but mine's a 2-story. So the home in itself, like I'm going to occupy less than, 4,000 square feet total with the footprint, and it's a 13,000 square foot lot. So in this case, I could still build, but because it's 2-story, and there's in both units still end up with a larger backyard and everything. So
Because here's my thing that I might, not for you, but this is what I wonder builders doing, where they build, like, somebody who wants to be a landlord, they buy a house, they put 100, basically the whole back, well, you can use it in the front yard now, so you cover 80% of the lot with building.
50%. That's still applicable.
But, is that state law, or is that what we have currently?
That's what our zoning code requires. And then we can still impose that because it's applicable to our single-family homes.
Okay, that's what I was wondering,
Yep.
because my also concern is people who are current landlords going, I can put 2 ADUs where I now have renters.
Yeah.
And
That's
like,
what the state wants.
right, but, when you already have renters there who already have a lease, like, this could, I just see this, like, can you imagine you're renting a house, and all of a sudden, you have no control that your landlord is now building 2 ADUs for 2 other families to start living in.
Other
Of what
than if
you
you
thought
have a
was your
lease,
rental.
I know there's probably
wasn't
going to be
saying
cans
for
of
your
worms.
Yeah.
situation.
I mean, I really appreciate, Max being in the middle of it, and I kind of default back to that lot coverage thing because, we have a lot of teeny tiny lots in town. We have a lot of 6,000 square footers.
Yeah.
But if you have, he has a lot big enough to split.
Yeah.
He has a lot big enough to do other things with. He wants to do it. And I think, and from how he talks about construction being expensive, so is heating a house and everything. And it's cheaper to heat, even though there will be the fire separation, it'll be cheaper that the houses are attached than it would be if that house was detached, just to keep it warm and things like that. So I think that, it kind of does make sense to not limit the size to 1,000.
No, I wasn't trying to say that.
Yeah,
I was trying
no,
to I was trying to think in my mind, like, worst case
We're never gonna
scenarios.
outthink the builders, ever. We're never gonna outthink, we're gonna try, but we're never gonna outthink.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm not,
You could always go with the idea that detached would be 1,000, but attached would be the 50% lot coverage, because that'll naturally limit the size that guys like Max have to deal
Right.
with.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like my lot is an acre. So why would, I mean, it seems, if one of my kids if I wanted to build an ADU,
Mm-hmm.
why would it matter if mine was 1,000? I'm not taking anywhere near like half the
Mhm.
footprint.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. I can just see like there's always some people who will be out there to try to screw over and just they'll do whatever they can for greed and money and not care about, if they're not living there, they don't care. And that's what I'm looking out for. And that's why I was asking about like basically filling up a whole lot with that, which you're saying that wouldn't be a possibility. But that's what I wanted to know.
And Dave brought up the example of the subdivision on Washington Street, or CC Street, one of those two. This is kind of eliminates the pressure to subdivide and build 2,000 square foot homes, because
Yeah.
if you could build 2,000 square foot ADUs, you might not have the neighbor pissing off his neighbors by subdividing and
Yeah.
and gentrifying.
there's a lot of thresholds there to look at. For instance, you know, if that place on CC Street had done a 2,000 square foot ADU, they wouldn't have to do half street improvements and things that make our city better, our streets safer. You know, and we're not allowed to require those things according to the state.
Yeah, and the interesting question is, are those streets, do they have more woodland character because they don't have that giant road and the ugly sidewalks and all the curb cuts? Or is
you
it?
know, the sidewalk goes 40 feet and stops, and 40 feet and stops, and 40 feet and stops.
Yeah.
I have, could the state say anything about, you know, they're looking for ADUs to be infill. So we gotta consider, we don't want ADUs to be part of new construction where people are just dodging those fees that we are collecting. So is there an age?
No, that you have to allow that.
No. As a matter of fact, we would collect, like, for impact fees, we would collect more impact fees, because in the new subdivision, you could build a home and you might pay $20,000 of impact fees. If you do an ADU and a home, we would get 15,000 of impact
Instead of
fees
40.
instead of 10.
Oh,
Or-
if they did two homes,
Oh.
you'd do 40. You're doing a house and ADU, so it's,
Yes, but we might get 4 units instead of 2.
On the same lot, so I would still pay the impact fees.
right. But
Yeah.
you have an existing home that you're doing infill, obvious infill project,
Yeah.
which is the spirit of what the state
Is
Mhm.
looking at. Yep.
is wanting. And that's what, so we have a code, the planned unit residential code, and
Mhm.
it talks about projects that have one larger house and then smaller houses around it or something. And, you know, we've got to work out what is classified as an ADU and when. And
Mhm.
that might be a question to ask, if we can only discount those fees on infill.
On the ADU.
On,
So, like, for example, on those new lots, they could build a house at full price and a second unit at half price. So that extra unit is bonus, because if they have 2 lots, we'd get 2 singles plus 2 ADUs. So now we'd get
I
four
guess-
impact fees instead of 2.
I guess we get the density,
Yeah.
so.
But there can only be one owner
No.
of the lot.
Not under these new rules. You could sell the ADU.
As a condo.
Yep.
But doesn't it have to be attached then?
No. If it's attached, it would be a condo sale. If it is detached, it would be like a mobile home on the lot. So the real property would be the structure, not the underlying property. And so that's kind of like what a mobile
What do you
home
think,
park
Dave?
is.
How do you ensure that?
Yeah. Obviously not the state's problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think in the spirit of the kind of like what the intent is, you know, I guess in particular in my case, like, you know, going back to the discussion, I just, as I was planning this out, I said, okay, like, you have some aging parents, they're going to live in here for the next, God willing, you know, 20 years or 15, whatever it is. And what is a good kind of comfortable fit, you know? So I'm mostly looking at that. So.
Also, if your house is 50 feet wide across the back, you know, it's sensible. If you're going to add on to the back of your house to do, you know, it could be the best thing to do to go the whole 50 feet, and that might push you over a square footage, you know. So, I think, and I know Travis put something in there because that's what the state said we had to have.
Yeah.
But
And Max brings up an interesting point. Maybe what they were thinking is not for Max's grandparents, but for Max's kids. If he wants to give his kid an asset for them to build their credit and to borrow against to make a build, you know, to build a business, Max could leave each of his kids one of the units, and now it becomes a rental business for them, or it becomes a tangible asset that they could use as collateral for another home. Or so maybe that's what they were thinking, even though it doesn't resolve that problem of how do you do the paperwork. The state doesn't care, but that might be an interesting use of it.
I mean, they'll have to figure out the property taxes.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have.
Yeah, and that's for the assessor to figure out.
I would like to see it on an infill, not on a new construction.
You can't limit it.
You know,
So that's interesting. I don't think we can do that because I think that would fall under, we cannot add a regulation or a restriction that we don't apply to single-family residential. So in a subdivision, we don't prohibit single-family residential. Therefore, you can't prohibit 2 ADUs, not just 1, 2. So literally any new subdivision. Now, how they would get around that is subdivision CC&Rs might prohibit, in which case, like Holt Homes, they won't build any with ADUs because it's not consistent with their CC&Rs. But again, if you're a buyer, I'll issue you an ADU, but that doesn't mean that you're kosher with Holt Homes and the neighbors. So the CC&R may be a limiter that's outside of our control.
Now, if, like, let's say we keep it as like 50% of the footprint.
I'm sorry,
Let's say we keep it at like 50% of the footprint.
Yep.
Someone could always appeal. They could come to you and come to the planning commission and say, this is my design, I'm at 51%, you know, and you're
ask for
still
a
allowed
variance.
to appeal as an exception, correct?
they could request a variance, yeah.
That's what I meant.
So
Couldn't think of
one
the right word.
one thing we would have to look at is we may not be able to restrict the ADU, but as part of this process, we could add a variance criteria that says, that addresses that issue. So anybody can apply for a variance, but you have to meet the criteria. So that's not an ADU regulation, that's a variance regulation.
Well, we're learning.
Okay. So that's,
Dave had something to say there for a minute, was,
I just was gonna say, it comes down to not a lot of difference between a house and an ADU.
yeah,
When you draw the line of definition.
okay, so criteria number 6 is there shall be one off-street parking space in a garage or in a carport, garage, or designated space, provided the accessory dwelling unit in addition to that which exists on the site for the primary residence. So the new code says that 1 per unit if the lot is less than 6,000 square feet, and 2 off-street parking spaces if the lot is more than 6,000 square feet. Now that's an option. You can keep the old language, which is 1 per unit, regardless of the lot size,
off-street.
off-street.
So, like for his, let's use you as an example. Can, like the parking pad before the garage be counted as off-street parking?
Yes.
It's just maneuvering cars.
So the, yes, so the average house already has 4 parking spaces. The 2 in the garage and the 2 in the driveway. And most homes store crap in their garage and they park their cars on the home or on the apron.
The only confusing part on that language is, so, but this is talking about 2 parking spaces per ADU.
Per ADU.
It's kind of odd that it's, if you have a larger lot, it's required, why would they require more parking just because you have a larger lot?
You're building a bigger ADU, I'm assuming.
Yeah. If you guess, then I will have an answer to that.
They're not
But-
saying we have to require it, they said we can.
And it's off-street parking, so it's kind of assuming that you have more frontage,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, and I guess if you're building two-bedroom ADUs, you're gonna need 2 parking places.
But that's not dependent upon the lot size, that's dependent upon the unit size. So yeah, Max is pointing
I
out
mean,
that this doesn't,
You could build a 2-story ADU, and you,
The
so,
state,
as long as you're under.
the
what,
state
30?
wants us walking, that's part of it.
Well,
Yes,
but
you know,
yeah,
it's,
because if you're within a transit stop, you don't have to,
Yeah.
you can't require any parking.
In my particular case, I live on the cul-de-sac and it kind of throats down. And once again, I still can fit some cars and whatnot, but I just, most of the lot area that I have available is in the backyard, so it kind of makes a unique situation where, yes, I have a larger lot, but most of the area is in the backyard.
Yeah.
I can fit the necessary cars in the front, but just requiring 2, it's kind of
Yeah.
odd. Just because I have a bigger backyard, I need more parking space.
I can also say that I know the state is considering removing and reducing parking standards. So even this may
I mean,
go away in the future.
I would realistically probably leave it at 1 per ADU.
put a pin in that.
Because we can always have, like, I would rather have, like, standards and have variance criteria, so that if people have, like you said, like,
Pie shape.
or something,
Yeah.
you know, other things that make it an unusual lot and not a cookie cutter lot. There's always gonna be exceptions. I'd rather leave room for the exceptions than just allow, like, wide open. Or be so restrictive that people
Well,
can't
well,
infill.
there again, I think about if it's new construction, right? They're building a house with 2 ADUs. They're doing a subdivision of 10,000 square foot lots, and each one has a house with 2 ADUs. They better plan for off-street parking for all that, right? So we could require the 2, and then, you know, right, anything with a number can have a variance, right?
Yes.
So you could require 2 off-street
You
for
could-
new construction.
We already do.
No, I
Yeah.
meant,
Oh.
for the ADUs. Could you do that?
Well, they would all technically be new construction.
No, I meant for like in a fully built, like you're building the home and the ADUs at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So,
So in that case, they would be required to have at least 3 parking spaces, but they would have 4 anyways.
Or according to the 2 per unit, that would be, if it was over a 6,000 square foot lot, that would be 6.
Yeah. Yep. Which means 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway, plus 2 additional units.
Yeah.
Plus 2 additional.
It'd have to be planned that way. Because you don't want all those cars in the street. You know, if you've got
like the apartments
several
next to
of
the
those,
Promise Church or where Fleetwood used to be.
yes.
Now, the other thing you have to bear in mind, and that is the more parking you have, the more cars are going to be in people's front yards. So if you do require 2 spaces, that means Max is going to have a very tiny front yard because he's got parking, because you don't want them on the street. So
Well, unless
Mm-hmm.
Max asks for a variance that says,
But
I need a variance to this rule.
and his isn't a new construction. Like,
well,
like for the whole
Yeah.
unit system.
We can kick all that around. We do
Yeah.
need to keep it moving.
yeah.
Huh, Cliff?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so number 7 is accessory dwelling units shall be located only in the same building as the principal residence unless the lot is at least 8,500 square feet.
I think we know that has to go.
Yes. So, although there could be some variation on that, but it doesn't have to be attached anymore. You can have detached and attached. So it would be simpler to just remove that. And that first suggestion where I said 2 units attached or detached would solve this problem. And we could delete this outright. Simplifies it considerably. So number 8 is an accessory dwelling unit shall be designed to maintain the appearance of the main building. And again, this is the one that I was referring to when the Leavenworth Bavarian home, Bavarian ADU. So unless you want to institute...
Is there anything else in our code, like the doors or anything that...
That is only in this section as far as I know. But you raised the question about the single-family residential, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I will look at that for next meeting.
And that's where it says that a separate entrance for the accessory dwelling shall be located either off the rear or side of the building.
Yep, and so we could no longer regulate that unless you want to institute all residential districts.
We should see what we have,
design
and I
reviews
think
then.
it's a fire code thing. So we should see what we have.
Okay, and if we do, then you could opt to not require it or require it. And then the last one is accessory dwelling unit shall meet all technical code standards, building, electrical, fire, plumbing, etc. So that one I recommend you don't mess with.
Good. Is that the last one?
That is the last one.
Can the parking issue also be determined on the streets because, and where they're at, because not all streets have have the ability to park on both sides of the streets. For example, like most of CC and Washington and Gun Club.
I don't think we could do that because we don't have that standard for single-family homes. That is a great way to solve the problem, but unfortunately, that would violate the have to treat it like a single-family home. So unless we change all zoning districts to increase parking if there's no on-street parking, we couldn't do it for ADUs only. That caveat, when you
Just know,
start to,
it's CC and Washington have become like some of the streets in Longview where you've got to drive in and out of the parked cars and hope that nobody comes down at the same time the opposite way.
yeah, we would have to change that for all new homes if we're gonna change it to all new ADUs.
Can there be, is there code things that can be done for existing landlords if they already have a renter in place with leases before ADUs are built on the property and rented out?
You have any thoughts on that?
I don't think we get into any tenant rights stuff in anything that we do, but I think if somebody was gonna do that, they'd be talking to their tenant before they made the backyard smaller or started added onto the house or whatever they're, you know,
Yeah.
so.
I think that's kind of like the HOA question is that's purely civil.
Yeah. Have we discussed it enough for tonight? I think we're gonna, I'm gonna ask to continue the next item to the next meeting.
And you might even want me to not even continue that one. You want me to just kind of do another version of this for that one?
So it really wasn't what I was looking. I was trying to get away from highlighting paragraphs and
Okay.
everything. I was trying to get like, we got this many apples and we need to have this many apples, and so we need to change this and this, you know. That's where I was getting to. You know, we're able to go through it this way, but it was hard to, wasn't easy to study that because it wasn't that way, you know, on our stuff.
Okay.
And that's kind of, I don't know. We can talk about it.
Okay.
We'll have time to talk about it.
You want to come
but,
see me early next week and we'll.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's.
We'll grab a giant Post-it
They
pad,
used
put
to.
it
I'll
on
tell you
the
what
wall.
they used to do to me too. They used to give me this stuff and give me a packet, and then the font was that big, and then some of it had a red line through it, and then, you know, the new words were there, and it's just eye bleeding, you know. Or not just give me the code number and not give me the code at all. The state does that a lot with their stuff, you know. Cities that are planning under RCW 3670A010, well, now I gotta go look up 3670A01. Just, if it's under the GMA or is not, you know, just tell us. Don't make us go look up code. But
Was this PowerPoint a little more helpful?
well, the meat and
Just
potatoes
too
wasn't
long.
in it. It, you know, I was kind of hoping to dive in. We got to learn about this. I think we all read the state deal, but you know, the meat and potatoes wasn't in that, and we were kind of hoping to get to meat and potatoes. We got to get, and I think, you know, some of this stuff we want to make sure when we put code together. Hopefully, we get to have a meeting with City Council, and we're going to do some things that are in the direction that they want to go before we complete them and waste a bunch of time on them, so we don't have a list of ordinances that were never voted on. We just get to move this stuff through and make it happen. Because especially like in this case, it's going to happen whether we do it or not. And so these little things, these little tweaks and stuff are, you know, great things to talk about and everything. And you know, the parking is a very big deal. The size is, you know, we should have smart ways to talk about the size, but I don't know, it's kind of good just getting to the meat and potatoes and
Somebody also needs to teach legislation writers not to write things in double negatives. Because apparently they didn't learn that in school.
oh, well, the next one, and every time I read it, I can't even see where it applies to Woodland.
Well, you have to skip part of it until you get to things under 25,000. Like, I just don't read that part, because
I never found it.
Confused by that.
It just kept getting bigger and bigger, bigger cities and never got under 25,000.
It's at the end.
Okay.
They
Well,
start in the middle and then go to a bigger, and then the next one is the
the last one is
25.
under 25,000 that has a urban growth boundary that's attached to a bigger city.
Yeah.
Is the last
I
one.
might
So,
have missed that part.
Yes.
all right. So we're gonna see what we can. I actually don't think there's that. From me reading it till my eyes bled, I don't think there's that much different. There's not much that affects us. Period. In there, and I think some of the code we already have covers the things they were wanting in the first place, and so I don't think that one's that big a deal for all of the state regulations that are in there.
Well, if you keep the parking off the streets, that's gonna solve 90% of it.
Not gonna get to that today.
I hope so. You know, like the apartment she's referring to, you make the builders build all this parking, and then these people still have the car that runs the least out in the street. And I don't know, some of this needs to be 2-hour parking in places and stuff, I think. You know, I don't think we did a great job on some of that stuff back then. So,
Maybe make an enforcement problem.
If I could make a quick comment.
sure.
I know we didn't get down to it on the agenda, because I know this is a big, big change. There is also the House Bill 1110, which I think Travis will introduce next time around. And maybe it might be worth even starting with that one, because it delineates, I think, between what like a owner like myself wants to do, which is the ADUs, and it delineates the provisions now in state law that allow you to build actual like triplexes and fourplexes and subdivide single family lots, which I think most residential builders, or we can say corporations or whoever, I think most builders will target that House Bill law.
That's the one we're talking about. That it starts out talking about GMA cities that have 25,000 to 75,000 people, and it has about 4 pages, and then it goes to cities that have between 75,000 and more, and then it goes to cities that are under 25,000, but their urban growth boundary borders a city over 75,000, then they have to do these certain things. But it doesn't ever refer to a city less than 25,000 that's not bordered against. So there's actually, in all that stuff in there, really nothing they're gonna make us do. And actually in some of our code, we'll get into that next week, we have a great piece of code that allows builders, if they put in the effort to make a neighborhood good, then they get more density and more freedoms, and there's different thresholds there. There's points. If you have ADA approved this and that, and if you have walking paths, and you have different things, you can have more density. And then if you get points for each thing, and if you go over a certain amount of points, you can get a whole lot of density. But it builds a neighborhood that is aesthetically pleasing, healthy neighborhood with various sizes and shapes of constructions, you know, and homes that they just have to, i.e., parking at the back of the house. Everybody shares a back driveway, and they're not parking on the street. They park at the back of the house. You know, that's worth points. You know, and all of those things add up. If it's low-income housing, if it's 55 and over, if it's all these things, they get points and they get more density to make it pencil out better to build that nice. We have that code. We're just not, it's not getting used enough. And we should be pushing builders toward that code. And then, you know, we get more walking paths, and it allows them to actually take their critical areas and turn them into usable areas and not build something on them, but make a walking path that people can use, or, you know, different things. So that 1110 doesn't really apply to us much, and I think we have everything that covers everything in there in our code. It's just not getting used. So we will pick that up next week with the school board at the end. We'll make them sit and listen to us geek out on state codes. So
Next month.
We can also,
Next month,
always,
January,
when they get here.
January 15th.
yeah, we can adjust the agenda.
Yeah.
So anyway, can we get a motion to adjourn? I got up early this morning.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, motion been made and seconded.
Sorry, Matt.
All those in favor?
Right.
I'm sorry, folks, this was a long one. There was only 3 things on the agenda too, Cliff. Yeah, you hear your mom calling? Yeah. Oh, how do I end? End meeting for all. Dave, what'd you think?
He's
Is
probably
this-
glad he didn't join
is
the
this
planning
the-
commission.
Most entertainment you can get on a Thursday night, or what?
I haven't been this entertained in years.
Missing the Seahawks.
Yeah, what's the score? I feel like I'm low on oxygen. Have you gotten to read that PURD code?
Not for a long time.
It's like 16, it's in chapter 16, 1630-ish, somewhere in there in the code book. And,
I haven't looked at the PURDs since they got put in place years ago.
so we changed